Hello and welcome to another episode of the Vegan Luna podcast. This is episode 10 and I cannot believe that it's already episode 10. It seems just like yesterday that I started this podcast, and I'm so excited for our guest today because this really brings out the essence and the value that this podcast brings to every single person. This individual is from Kuwait and he is a medical student. He's been vegan for 4 years, and what's amazing about his story is how he truly wants to help people, and he's seeking the medical profession to really help people's lives and make a difference in this world. And he shares the inside scoop of what is taught in medical school, how much nutrition is taught, and do they really help to prevent diseases, or do they just treat the symptoms? We're going to find out that and much, much more in this episode. Stay tuned because this is gonna be an amazing episode. All right, hello and welcome to the Vegan Luna podcast. I'm here today with an incredibly special guest from Kuwait. Now, some people still don't know where Kuwait is, and I do urge every single person to look up where Kuwait is because it's a small little place right in the Middle East, but it has a huge amount of culture, a huge amount of character, and there's a lot of surprisingly plant-based, healthy, environmentally focused people, like the person I'm sitting with today. His name is Badir, and he is a medical student, which is super cool. I'm very excited to talk a little bit about nutrition. I'm super excited to talk about medical school in general and just that industry. I'm so fascinated with everything in the industry. At one point, I myself wanted to be a doctor. I never took the leap of faith into going into that field, but who knows? Maybe after this conversation, I might be inspired to actually go take that journey. Once again, some of you guys know I am studying nutrition, so I am learning a little bit about that side already. And Badir, go ahead and take it away. Introduce yourself.
So my name is Badr Al Ali. I'm a 22-year-old Kuwaiti. I study medicine in Manchester, University of Manchester. Going into my 4th year, so hopefully in 2 years I'll graduate. And I've been a vegan for about 4 years now.
Wow, awesome. So 4 years.
Yeah. Wow,
that's amazing. I think when a lot of people think about veganism and they think about timing, and one of the things that I see a lot from people is you hear at least what blows up in the media is oftentimes the ex-vegans, right? The ones that are no longer vegan or no longer following that lifestyle, and most of the time it often comes down to certain choices that they make that are not quite in line with the true value and the true purpose of veganism. Oftentimes they're doing the raw vegan diet, which is very challenging, very tough on your body, and very hard to maintain long term. So when someone hears 4 years, it stands out a lot, especially you're saying 22 to 18. That's a very interesting, I would say, jump. From 18, I can only think back when I was 18, I had no clue about that. I mean, I actually went vegan when I was 29. So my that's almost 11 years or whatever that is. Which is amazing. Also, you said medical student, which is really what I'm super interested in, and talking about that. Tell me a little bit more about that. What made you interested in jumping into medical school? What are some of the things that you're learning? What is that like?
So when I was in high school, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew I was good in the sciences and the maths, and I had good grades, but I still didn't have an idea of what I wanted to do. Obviously, when you're in Kuwait, they give you 2 options, engineering or doctor. Like, other than that, family isn't too happy. I found myself interested more in the medical sciences. For example, when I was in high school, one of my favorite subjects was biology. So I enjoyed anatomy a lot. And even medical school, if you talk to most medical students, anatomy is the least favorite subject to medical students, but I actually really enjoy it. So medical school in England tends to be a 5-year program with 1 year foundation. So in the first 2 years, you learn about the sciences, like the physiology of the human body, the anatomy, pathology, so how diseases start in the body, and pharmacology, so how drugs interact with the body and how the body reacts to these drugs. And then in the last 3 years, we call them the clinical years. So that's when you're actually in the hospital and you get to speak to real patients, you get to examine them. And it's a very different format of learning. You don't feel like you're a student anymore. When you're a student in the first 2 years, the university actually looks after you. But once you start being in the hospital, then you're not the major priority. Most people around you are either doctors or patients. And the patient always comes first. That's what we're taught. So you feel like you're someone threw you off a ship, basically. You're trying to swim.
That's super cool. And that must be, for sure, like the most fun part. Like being in the hospital, being in the thick of things. Because I feel like most people that want to be doctors, they really want to help.
Yeah.
You know, like they want to help. Like when I think about being a doctor, you know, I think of like ER, you know, like Grey's Anatomy and like saving lives, you know, and in kind of like the worst case scenarios, you know, it's like what you picture. You know, of course, there's, you know, people that are coming in for a normal checkup, you know, there's those doctors, you know, radiology, you know, you say the anatomy and all the other kind of small sectors, right, within it. But most people, when I think doctors, is like emergency room, surgery, and that sort of stuff, which is, I mean, kind of exciting and exhilarating when you think like, I am responsible for saving this person's life. I think that's a cool thing to do. And I think that's what, like, most people want. Like, no one wants someone to die. No one wants to really injure someone or harm someone. And no one really wants to see someone in suffering, right? And so that really begs the question, what you're learning. I didn't hear anything about nutrition or anything like that. Can you tell me a little bit about what kind of nutrition training that you're familiar with that takes place within the program? Not what you've learned, what takes place within the program that maybe you're doing or maybe the majority of doctors are doing.
Okay, so just to talk about personal experience. So being in university for close to 4 years now, I just recall having one lecture about nutrition. That was 2 years ago, and it was quite a broad lecture, if I might say. They talk about like the biological aspect, so the biochemistry.
Sorry, when you say lecture, how long was this?
Like a 50-minute lecture.
50?
Yeah.
Okay, 50 minutes.
So let's say an hour, basically.
Okay, an hour.
In the past 4 years. And it talks about a healthy, balanced diet. So we hear this term a lot in the hospital. We do tell patients, you need to have a healthy, balanced diet. But who defines what a healthy, balanced diet is? From patient to patient, that obviously differs. And this happens a lot. So even like... the United States, in 8 years of medical school, average physician gets a few hours, maybe a day in total out of those 8 years, unless they have a specific interest in nutrition. So I'd say doctors tend to focus on this. They don't focus on disease prevention. We're trained to learn about how to diagnose disease and what causes disease, and then how to treat it and manage it. And diet rarely comes into the picture. We only focus on nutrition if the patient's malnourished. So if the patient is dehydrated or isn't eating properly, then we bring a dietitian to supplement them. But we don't really talk about disease prevention through nutrition.
Yeah, for sure. So tell me, why do you think that is? What would be a reason that isn't something that's focused on or something that isn't taught within the medical program?
I think it's basically just the demands that are on medical students. So when you go into medical school, they tell you you can break information into 3 categories. So like things that are you need to know, things that are good to know, and things that are nice to know. So when you go into medical school, you're learning so much in a week. So you're learning about drugs, you're learning about how to take a patient's history, how to different signs in the body of diseases and different drugs. So there's so much to learn in a week that even the stuff that you have to know, it's kind of impossible to learn all of it during the week. So I think that's part of it, that nutrition is just not seen as something important to the medical world. And we focus so much on treating symptoms rather than preventing disease. So even with other things like alcohol and smoking, and we tend to treat it once it's too late. So once the patient's already an alcoholic, or once a patient's already dependent on tobacco, we give them, and even the way we treat those. So if someone is dependent on tobacco, you give them options. So they could do therapy, they could like talk therapy, they could do nicotine replacement like patches, and even there's tablets as well they can take. So we focus so much on quick pills rather than preventing the disease. And I think that's one of the issues with the system. But there are as well some positive aspects to it as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if I break my leg, like I'm definitely going to the doctor.
Yeah.
I mean, I need that, right? So what do you think is maybe is there a driving force? You know, is it money? Is it the big pharma? Is there anything that maybe those two are related that maybe people don't know about?
So if I use the UK as an example, because when we talk about big pharma and we talk about these industries, we think mostly about the US, but for in the UK, for example, if someone wants to be a doctor in the UK, they're not really going into the profession for the money, because if you look at the salaries of doctors in the UK, it's practically nothing. Like the highest rank, which is a consultant, makes around £70,000 a year, which is maybe 30 to 35,000 Kuwaiti dinars compared to a consultant here in Kuwait. So, and a junior doctor makes basically minimum wage, and they're working 80 to 90 hours a week. So they're really going into this because they either have a passion in it, or it's not because they're looking for a profit interest. But obviously, big pharma does play a role. But I think the medical world recently, in the past few years, have been catching up to holistic medicine. So even us as medical students, they talk to us about having a patient-centered approach, taking the patient's views, even decision-making as a process. So in the past, it used to be a physician knows best, so the doctor knows everything.
Yeah.
But now that changed. So now it's called shared decision-making.
Wow.
So you take in consideration the patient's views, you tell them all the facts, and then they have to decide themselves.
Wow, that's awesome. So there's been a huge movement lately that maybe some people don't really realize. There's been a lot of doctors medically trained, just like you are being medically trained, the same kind of training or very similar, that are making a shift in the way that they train or the way that they educate their patients. And they're switching to more of a plant-based approach. Mm. Now, can you talk about a few doctors that you're familiar with that are doing this kind of cutting edge, almost new age style of treating diseases, and why that differs? Maybe talk about a couple of the doctors that you know. Okay, maybe like this one on the table we got right here, and maybe kind of like what's the difference with what they're doing.
Okay, so I'm just to clarify before I answer your question. So I'm just a student. Technically, I can't really give any medical advice to anyone. Like even as a student, I can't go to a patient, tell them advice on something that isn't controversial, like stopping smoking. I can discuss it with them and see their views, but I can't really tell them you should do this.
Wow. Because
first of all, it would be unethical for me to do that. I'm still not a doctor, and then it could get me in trouble, basically. So
yeah.
So the reason I became...
Sorry, yeah. So just to clarify the question, it's what do you know about the plant-based doctors, and what are some of the ones that you know, and how are they doing it different than traditional medicine?
Yeah, so that's actually the real reason I became vegan. So when I was 18, I was just a normal skinny kid that was feasting on junk food every day, and I didn't really consider my health at all. The more I ate junk food, I didn't feel like this was affecting my health. I wouldn't say I was an athlete, but I was pretty active, so I would play different sports at a beginner's level. So I didn't smoke or do any of these things, but I didn't think my health was something that was worrying me until I came across the plant-based doctors movement in the United States. So like people like Dr. McDougall and Esselstyn and Pritikin and Dr. Greger and Joel Furman. So these people, when I actually saw that, there's a new way of treating patients that focuses on lifestyle, because I know people tend to have this fear of taking medication for any disease. So I was interested. I listened to it and I was shocked because I've never heard that diet can have such a major impact on your health, and some diseases that are caused by lifestyle can actually be reversed and managed with lifestyle. And that was the real reason I became vegan.
Wow. So what are they doing differently that you would say, like talk about this book right here we got right here is hold it up if you want for the camera. All right. So this one we got right here is called How Not to Die by Michael Greger. Have you read this one?
I haven't read this book, no, but I've watched almost a lot of Dr. Greger's videos, but I've read the other books. I've read Dr. McDougall's books, like Start Solution.
The Start Solution,
yeah. And but I haven't read this book in particular. But I've seen most of his lectures, and
Yeah.
I've seen the lectures on this book. So I felt it was kind of pointless to read the book.
For sure.
It's on my reading list, but
Yeah.
I still didn't read the book. I am aware of what the book talks about. So he talks about the 15 causes of death, top 15 causes of death in the U.S. and how a plant-based diet can reverse those. And he specifically
Not quite all of them.
not
It
all of them, but
reverses-
it has an influence on some of them. Things such as
Yeah.
lung conditions and even suicide.
Yeah. So what's the number one cause that humans die?
Heart disease.
Heart disease,
Yeah.
right? And about how many worldwide? About, give or take.
I'm not sure about the exact number, but for example, in Kuwait, it's close to 45 to 50% of deaths in Kuwait are caused by heart disease.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So
Yeah.
tell me more about Kuwait maybe and what you know about Kuwait and the health status of Kuwait.
Well, for it's even countries that are we see adopting an American lifestyle. So in medical school, for example, we learned that Asians are at a higher risk of having what we call metabolic syndrome. So like high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes, obesity. And we learned that there's a genetic aspect to those. But if you look at these countries in the past, they didn't really have high rates of obesity and these chronic diseases.
Yeah.
Once they moved to the West and adopt these lifestyles, then their condition becomes actually higher and worse than Caucasians. So if you look at Kuwait, for example, we have Kuwait and the Gulf countries, we have some of the highest rates of obesity. And obviously diet, because if you go anywhere in the world, you won't see people spending their money every single day eating out and barely working out. Like, it's kind of funny. One of my friends says, Kuwait, we have one of the highest numbers of people who go to the gym, but we also have the highest number of people who eat out. So it's kind of a paradox, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I've definitely seen that since I've been living here. I was almost like walking through the malls. I feel like I'm in America. You know, I see Burger Kings and the McDonald's and Cheesecake Factory and
Yeah.
PF Chang's. And I see all these restaurants that I'm like, I know these restaurants. These are the same restaurants that are in America. These are the same restaurants, the KFCs, the Taco Bells. And seeing those everywhere here was just mind-boggling. Like, I couldn't believe how much there was here. And what amazes me that's a little bit different is in the US, yes, there's a large amount of fast food places. Of course, I mean, that's where it originated. But you notice a shift in people in saying, I don't eat fast food that much. I try to stay away from fast food. I don't eat fast food at all, right? They just cut it out completely. And a lot, like especially in the more progressive cities. Like
And
I was
with kids
living
as well.
I was living in Los Angeles. You know what I mean? So people going to fast food, yes, there's, 20 million people in Los Angeles. Of course, the fast food get their share. But the majority of people that are a little bit aware, they know that that's not okay. Even the ones that go there, they're like, I know I shouldn't be having this. Oh, I shouldn't be going to McDonald's. I shouldn't be going to Taco Bell. But some do, and some still go. Whereas I noticed the mindset here as much, and not, at least from my experience, it isn't shameful as much to go into a fast food place. It's fine. You know what I mean? Maybe it's as shameful as far as like class or money wise, or that's cheap food or whatever. But I don't think it clicks as much as like that's shameful for health reasons. You know what I mean? Especially something like KFC. Like I can't tell you how many times someone's like, oh, I want KFC. Oh, I'm going to bring KFC for the party. And it's to me, I think KFC and it's instantly, of course, unhealthy. You know, fried food. We're always taught fried food's the worst, you know, no matter what it is. And I lived in the South, what's called the South in the U.S. for 3 years, I lived in Houston, Texas. Okay. Fried food, they call it soul food, right? Where you got the fried chicken, you got the mashed potatoes, you have the mac and cheese, and collard greens and all kinds of other stuff, you know, that's very heavy and it's very fattening. And you look at the obesity rates there. The obesity rates is the highest in the entire U.S. is in the South. And you look at places in the West Coast, like Los Angeles, Portland, San Francisco. Obesity isn't that crazy, even though there's still fast food places everywhere. It's the combination of fast food and the soul food and the lack of awareness. and the lack of education that I think really plagues it. But people wake up, people start to understand. What I notice in the US is there's a huge amount of healthy people, for 100%. And they're a little bit more open to learning, more conscious of what goes in their body. Even stuff like the low carb diet, right? Just the idea of, I'm going to try a diet and it's going to be low carb. That's it. That's definitely a huge piece of what people think about. And somewhat in Kuwait that I've definitely talked to. But I think that health is at least becoming more important here. I've definitely seen that for sure. And I think that's very, very good for all of the Kuwaitis, because the more that you focus on health, of course, the longer you live, the better your life is. No one wants to die of any kind of chronic disease, like cancer or heart disease or diabetes. That's very painful for sure. So I want to jump back a little bit, like backtrack into something that you were talking about briefly, like kind of like why you went vegan. I want to hear more about that. Like, what was the turning point? What was really your mindset? Like, was there something that you watched, something that you saw that maybe triggered it? Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so as I said, I wasn't really someone who focused a lot on his health. I used to be, as my friends say, like a meat fanatic. So they were like, you're an extremist. You went from one end to the other. But I didn't really see it that way. So when I found out how a lot of stories of the plant-based physicians treating their patients by just making them change what they eat, and then they can actually go off their medication, that was such a light bulb experience for me, and I started considering if that would be something I could do in the future, for example. So I can't predict the future, but when I saw this movement to a plant-based approach in medicine, I was thinking, what if this could be the future of medicine? And that was what sparked the interest in me.
Do you see this as being a future in medicine, and why?
Solutions in the medical field tend to take so many years until they actually come into practice. So if you take smoking, for example, so there was studies from the 30s that smoking causes lung cancer, but then 20 to 25 years later, that's when the actual Surgeon General's report in the US came out saying smoking causes lung cancer. So I think this gap is going to shrink this time gap, because of the internet. So people now are more informed thanks to the internet. So many patients just come to the hospital and say to the doctor, I've read this online. Is this true? So I think once this starts to catch up with the public, then even the medical field might not need to invest effort into it, because the people will just be informed about it.
You brought up a really interesting point that is so true. My mother, who I love so much, like everyone loves their mother, she has suffered with a lot of chronic diseases and a lot of issues health-wise. And she has now gone vegan, thankfully. I think it's going to put a few more years on to the end of her life, because she was in really bad shape, and she's in her 50s. Really, really bad shape. She takes the typical American, like you see in the movies, where you, of course, eat unhealthy and you take many pills for your health. She's on like over 20 prescriptions. She was. Now she's on like less than half of those after switching to a vegan diet, which is just amazing. And she's a huge inspiration to me as far as health-wise and going forward. But she talks to me all the time about what she says to her doctor. She's like, hey, I told my doctor this today. Hey, I told my doctor this today. Hey, I asked my doctor about this, and I just think it's so funny that you bring that up, because it's so true that the patients are going to be bringing, I read this online, or I found out this, or I watched this documentary, and it's really going to put, for sure, like you said, a lot of pressure on them. I think that's very interesting and so true. Yeah.
We have to remember that in the end of the day, doctors are just people. So even though they go into this really long journey of learning about diseases and medications and surgeries, they tend to have experience just normal human emotions. So this was something really interesting that I discovered before even going to medical school, that if you break up rates of people who are addicted to substance abuse and tobacco and alcohol into careers, the doctors are the highest.
Wow.
So that was also really mind-boggling for me. How can people who learn the most on these substances and the harms of them tend to have the highest rates of people who actually do.
They
abuse
see
them.
like the direct end result on a daily basis of the damage that some of those substances cause. Yeah.
So maybe it's not really just the awareness. Maybe there's something else. I don't know what it is, but like if the people who know what these substances actually do to the body consume them more than anyone else, then we need to be tackling a different kind of question.
Yeah, for sure. Or like another approach, right?
Yeah.
For sure. Maybe there's a better approach, right? So there's something else that you said that leads me to my next question. And you said the internet, and the internet is the difference. Mm-hmm. And I strongly believe that. If you've seen some of my content, I talk about social media. I talk about the influence there, the power of your voice and all that sort of stuff. I'm a big believer in that. So I would like to know, what do you really do? Maybe on your own time or on your spare time or any time you have to really advocate for this lifestyle that maybe helps animals, the planet, or people. Like, what is some other things that you do?
So when I first went vegan, I thought I was the first vegan in Kuwait. Until I met other vegans and the Kuwait vegan group and society. So I had this, as every 18-year-old who's full of aspirations and motivated to, as if I stumbled upon this revolutionary thing. So I was going and preaching veganism all the time, and I was doing YouTube videos, but in Arabic. I was going to Diwaniyas and talking about veganism, trying to like convert my family and stuff. So I was really motivated in the beginning, and then my philosophy slowly shifted. I still have the same views exactly, but I started considering this. So there's this proverb that you can bring the camel to the water, but you can't make the camel drink.
Yeah, we have one in the U.S. because we don't have camels. We say you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink.
That's why I use camels to make it more local. So I realized once I stopped talking about veganism, then the people that come to me are the ones that are interested, and those are the ones that actually do the changes. But when I waste my breath and go to explaining and lecturing people about veganism, then they might be inspired for a few days, and they might even, I have a few friends that called me and I took them to co-op and showed them what to eat, but the results aren't long-term.
Yeah, very short-term.
Even we have this issue with the elderly in Kuwait, so I would never try to convince my grandma every Friday I have to go to the gatherings. It's practically impossible to explain to them that you can get protein from plants, and this just doesn't go into their head. So I think when I'm on my deathbed, am I really gonna think about those 4 hours I wasted trying to convince someone to go vegan that has a complete wall in front of them?
Yeah, for sure.
So now I try to
choose your battles, kind of.
Yeah, I try to live by example.
Yeah.
So I try to eat a whole foods plant-based diet and hopefully be healthy for a long term, to be a good example of that. And I always answer people's questions. I try to use my Instagram to shed light to some of the things that I see interesting, but I don't flood my Instagram with it because I feel like it might scare some people off, if that makes sense, because it's a personal account. But I am considering doing a separate account that focuses just on like the health facts of veganism.
Yeah, I know someone, actually a Kuwaiti, she's 15, and I think she's been vegan for 4 years. And she has her profile, okay? It's crueltyfree.kw. I'll share that as well on the link because she has an amazing profile. She has over 5,000 followers, I think. She's doing a great job. But her main profile is just pictures of her bowls. She makes amazing bowls, like beautiful, well-designed, not only smoothie bowls, all kinds of bowls. I mean, everything from lentils and rice and chickpeas and beans and everything. It's a beautiful profile. All the way you scroll down, the exact same shot. It looks great. She also does YouTube. She does YouTube all in Arabic. She has a great YouTube channel. And she has a separate one, right? And that separate account is really all about animals. And it's all about the abuse, the cruelty that goes through, that happens, within the meat-eating society, and anyone that eats animals, there's a large amount of cruelty that people don't know about. So it's kind of like what you're describing, you know what I mean? Where the profile like pretty much says nothing to do with veganism. It's just, this is delicious looking food. Yeah. Forget what's in it or what's not in it. And then separate one, right? So I think that's a great idea. And I think that can be very impactful, especially you know the market, you know the area, you know what it's like. And I think it's very interesting when people tell me, that, oh, you can't talk to Kuwaitis like that. Oh, that's not going to work here. And it's like perfectly fine. I've never once walked up to a single Kuwaiti and told them what to eat. Never. And I never will. That is not even close to my style, right? My style is I share my experience. I share my journey. I share stories with people that are like-minded. I share stories, on my Instagram, on my Facebook, on my YouTube. If somebody wants to have a conversation, I'm always happy to have a conversation. If someone wants to approach me, absolutely. But never do I do what you're describing, because that's totally the wrong way to get across to people. I totally agree. Like, no one wants to be preached to. No one wants to be lectured to. Nobody wants to be told what to do. Nobody, anywhere. And so you're right. It's definitely not the right approach. Everyone has their own style and what works for them. But like probably 95% of the people that follow me are in another country. There's probably like maybe 5% that are in Kuwait that actually follow me on my YouTube. Actually, my podcast though, interestingly enough, I do have a lot of Kuwaitis listening. I have a percentage, and it shows me, where they listen, what country they listen to, and I do have quite a lot of Kuwaitis. So thank you for all my Kuwaiti fans listening to me in Kuwait on the podcast. And I think a huge part of that is you guys. People like you that are in there every single day, talking to people, inspiring people, cooking amazing food, going to gatherings, going to events. I mean, the last 2 events we attended, you were there. Yeah. So I think that that's important. People seeing you, people seeing what you're doing, and just showing that this is fun. I have the most fun. People tell me about they enjoy the YouTube or they enjoy the Instagram or whatever they enjoy. The most fun I have is these conversations. I swear to you. I want to be like Joe Rogan, where I'm just sitting down, hanging out, talking, and somebody else do all the recording, all the editing, because this is fun. I have a blast talking to people like you. I have a blast talking to people that are inspirational, that are really making change. I think you're going to do a lot of big things. I think you have a huge, bright future ahead of you. You're only 22. Which to me is crazy. I think that hopefully you could be like Dr. Greger one day, or McDougall, or one of those super inspirational guys that just are making massive changes. Is there anything, as we wrap this up, is there anything that maybe you want the audience not to forget, or something that you really want to add that we didn't talk about?
Well, 2 things. So just to finalize the topic on what I do.
Okay, sure, yeah.
So when we learn in medical school that fear tactics fail. So if I go to someone who's been smoking for 40 years and I tell them this is going to cause heart disease and 50 different cancers and erectile dysfunction and all these things, it's going to go in one ear and out the other. But if you actually encourage the person to change and make them see that they have the resources to change, then that makes it easy for them to change. Yeah. And I noticed the same thing with when I talk about veganism to my friends. So the people that I actually share my personal story to, they're inspired and they come to asking me questions on what can we do to change this. Even if I don't want to go 100% vegan, how can I have no experience in the kitchen. What can I do? What do you do? What are some tricks? So these small things actually add up. And compared to the tactics that I used to when I used to talk about the harms of animal products, which are a thing and they're completely real, but if we go into someone who's been eating these products since they were a kid and you tell them this is killing you, they're not going to listen. They're going to shut off and just put so that's one aspect. The other aspect is
can I add to that? I think the biggest reason, and you're really almost an anomaly when it comes to this topic that I'm going to say. When you're young, you feel like you're going to live forever. You don't think anything affects you. When you were telling me your story of eating junk food and still active and not, I was the same way, especially when I was 18. I was super active. I was very active, running, sports all the time, and junk food diet. Pretty much always junk food. Yeah. So I think I didn't even care about my health. I remember taking a nutrition class, and I remember we tracked our diet and what we ate. And I remember it was a joke. I was like, I ate every single meal was fast food. And I was like, this is funny. No big deal. And so I totally get it. I think that mindset of being young and just like health, who cares? I'm young and I live forever. Not that you're an anomaly, but it's rare. I think it's rare for someone to really take a focus on their health at a young age. I think so.
That's the interesting thing about veganism is when you see different people following veganism for different reasons. So if I go to someone who's in their 70s and tell them about climate change or the number of animals dying, it won't really click with them. But if I tell them your coronary arteries or your prostate, then they'll listen. But if I say that to someone who's 18, 19, it's just not going to click with them. So what I tend to advise people is I use my Instagram to show a lot of the stuff I eat. So a lot of people ask me questions like, what is that? Or that looks good. And I share recipes with them. I never really used to go into the kitchen until I became vegan.
Same.
Yeah, so maybe I'm not gonna lie and say veganism is extremely simple, because there are things that you have to learn in the beginning. So you're gonna completely switch some of the things that you like. Chicken, for example, people would eat chicken every day, and now you're telling them don't eat chicken, eat a salad.
Yeah.
So their taste buds and calories, this needs to be researched. So if a person is thinking about going vegan or is interested in a plant-based diet, I generally say make small changes. So a small change per week can add up. So instead of having eggs and bacon for breakfast, have like a fool, for example, or falafel. Instead of going out every night, I know most people in Kuwait, they practically eat almost every night, which surprises me because almost every house has a housekeeper compared to the West. So I don't know why people aren't really attracted to home-cooked meals. That's one of the reasons that women are actually have better health than men, because they tend to consume home-cooked meals. And when you make the food at home, it's actually healthier, even in a nutritional aspect.
For sure.
So these small changes, snacking is a major issue in Kuwait. So one of the reasons people snack is because they're hungry. So if you actually eat a fully satiating meal, then you won't feel, your body doesn't tell you, oh, go snack on something or nibble on something. Yeah. These things can give you more calories than the meals that you're eating.
Yeah.
So yeah. I just tell people, focus on what you're putting in your body. Your body's your temple. And think about yourself in the future. Just like you have an exam that's in a few weeks, you don't want to be partying throughout the week and procrastinating. Treat your body the same way.
Yeah.
It should be, because it's the only place you have to. You need to take care of your health.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you also said something, I think on the point about, your body is a temple, I like to use the analogy of fuel. It's like a car. What kind of fuel are you going to put in your car? Like, imagine if you put some diesel in a car that's not designed for diesel. You might be putting the wrong fuel into your system. That's going to eventually cause some problems down the road. For sure. Yeah. So to wrap this up, I really want to ask you, where can people find you? If people are looking, I really want to follow this guy. I really like what he's doing. I want to see his journey. I want to see if he's going to be the next Dr. Greger, if that's going to happen, and I think it will. Share where people can find you.
My Instagram is public, The Real Vegan. So THE, Real REEL Vegan. I'm basically really active on Instagram, so they can find me there.
Yes. So everything that you do will be found on Instagram. Yeah. All right. Awesome. Well, I want to thank you so much for taking time to sit down with me. This will be up shortly, for sure. The podcast will be up shortly, and the video will be up on YouTube, Vegan Luna, and the podcast is the Vegan Luna Podcast. So you can find it there. All right.
Thank you for having me.